The September 11th attacks were sudden, orchestrated by terrorists, targeting the World Trade Center in New York and the Pentagon in Washington. The attacks resulted in the deaths of 3,000 people and led to significant changes in global security policies. Welcome. The planning for these attacks begins years in advance, as Al-Qaeda, under the leadership of Osama bin Laden, trained a group of terrorists to hijack civilian airplanes and use them as missiles against prominent American targets. The terrorists entered the United States using legal passports and visas. Some obtained tourist visas, while others entered with student visas, allowing them to move freely within the country without drawing attention. They did not use fake identities but relied on legal identities they obtained from their home countries, making them appear as ordinary citizens or students coming to the U.S. The terrorists settled in regular cities within the U.S., such as Florida, California, and New Jersey. They rented apartments or lived in typical student housing, making them inconspicuous as a group with terrorist intentions. They acted like normal people living their daily lives, whether by shopping or visiting public places like cafes and restaurants. Some of the terrorists, like Muhammad Atta and other key leaders of the attacks, had solid academic backgrounds. They learned English and adapted to American customs and traditions enough to blend in as ordinary residents. They were careful to act naturally and speak English appropriately in public, which helped them avoid drawing attention. Training in American flight schools. The terrorists enrolled in American flight schools as ordinary flight students, allowing them to access the civil aviation system without arousing suspicion. It appeared as though they were individuals seeking pilot licenses for professional or recreational purposes. Their interactions with flight instructors and fellow students seemed normal, allowing them to integrate easily into the learning environment without raising suspicions. Discipline and secrecy. The terrorists were highly disciplined in their behavior, showing no signs of actions that could be interpreted as suspicious. They maintained a high level of secrecy regarding their plans and avoided contact with anyone who might raise suspicions. They did not display any overt religious or political extremism while in the U.S., making them undetectable to authorities or those around them. Caution in financial dealings. The financial transactions made by the terrorists were handled with extreme caution. They did not transfer large sums of money or make unusual transactions. The funds they used came through small accounts to cover daily living expenses like housing and training, making them appear normal and not subject to scrutiny by banks or authorities. Frequent travel without raising suspicion. The terrorists traveled frequently between U.S. states using planes and internal routes without drawing attention. This movement helped them familiarize themselves with airport security procedures and plan how to bypass them on the day of the attack. They traveled as any ordinary American citizen or tourist would, taking routine trips between major cities. Limited group planning. Although 19 terrorists were involved in the operation, they rarely gathered in one place or communicated openly. They worked in small groups or individually, making it difficult for authorities to track them as an organized group. Meetings and gatherings were conducted discreetly, often in private apartments or hotels, far from public view. Avoiding suspicious networks and communications. The terrorists were cautious in their use of technology. They avoided sending emails or making communications that could be considered suspicious and relied on face-to-face meetings and traditional planning to evade detection by intelligence agencies. By using these methods, the terrorists managed to blend into American society and live for an extended period without raising any suspicions until the day of the attacks. At 8:46 a.m., First plane. The first plane, American Airlines Flight 11, crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. The plane had taken off from Boston en route to Los Angeles. It had been hijacked by 5 terrorists and struck the North Tower at high speed, causing a massive explosion and a fire in the upper floors. At that moment, people began to see smoke rising from the tower, but many thought the incident was a result of a plane accident. At 9:03 a.m., second plane. Less than 20 minutes after the first attack, United Airlines Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. This plane was also hijacked by 5 terrorists and collided with the tower at high speed, leading to another explosion and a massive fire. At 9:37 a.m., the Pentagon. The third plane, American Airlines Flight 77, was headed toward Washington, D.C., where it crashed into the Pentagon, the U.S. Department of Defense headquarters. The plane, hijacked by another 5 terrorists, struck the side of the building, causing part of it to collapse and killing all passengers along with dozens of Pentagon staff. At 10:03 a.m., fourth plane. The fourth plane, United Airlines Flight 93, was headed toward another target, believed to be either the White House or the Capitol in Washington, D.C. However, the passengers managed to learn what was happening through phone calls with their relatives and united to confront the hijackers. After a struggle with the terrorists, the plane crashed into a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, preventing it from reaching its intended target. Aftermath of the attacks. Collapse of the World Trade Center towers. As the massive fires continued to rage in the towers due to the jet fuel from the planes, the buildings began to collapse. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapsed first, followed by the North Tower at 10:28 a.m. The collapses were caused by the weakening of the tower's steel structure due to the intense fires. These collapses resulted in thousands of tons of debris and dust, burying hundreds of people beneath the rubble. Casualties. The total number of victims in the 9/11 attacks was approximately 2,977 people, including firefighters, police officers, and paramedics who were at the scene to rescue victims. Additionally, thousands were seriously injured. The victims were of multiple nationalities, including citizens from more than 90 countries. Material damage. The collapse of the towers led to the complete destruction of the World Trade Center complex and damage to surrounding buildings. The direct and indirect economic losses were estimated in the billions of dollars, with financial markets and stock exchanges significantly affected by the attacks. Global and political impacts. War on terror. After the attacks, U.S. President George W. Bush declared the War on Terror, leading to the invasion of Afghanistan in October 2001 to topple the Taliban government, which was harboring Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda. Iraq was also invaded in 2003 under the pretext of possessing weapons of mass destruction, leading to the fall of Saddam Hussein's regime. Strengthening domestic security. Following the attacks, security measures were tightened in the U.S. and worldwide. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security was established, and radical changes were made to travel policies, particularly in aviation. Airports became more secure and strictly monitored, and the powers of intelligence agencies were expanded. American society. The attacks left a deep impact on American society, leading to a wave of patriotism, but also fears of rising anti-Muslim sentiments and increased discrimination. The attacks also influenced U.S. domestic and foreign policy for years to come. Responsibility and identities. Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda claimed responsibility for the attacks. Osama bin Laden, the group's leader, later admitted in recordings that he was the mastermind behind the attacks. It was revealed that the 19 hijackers came from several Arab countries, primarily Saudi Arabia. Investigations. The 9/11 Commission conducted extensive investigations into the attacks and how they were carried out. The investigations revealed security and intelligence failures at the time, with security agencies failing to detect the hijackers and identify the threats before the attacks occurred. The End and the Hunt. Killing of Osama bin Laden. Years after the attacks, U.S. Special Forces were able to locate al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. In May 2011, a military operation was carried out in the Pakistani city of Abbottabad, leading to his death. This was seen as partial revenge for the victims, but the war on terror continued as threats from other extremist groups persisted.